When most people think of the Hebrew scriptures or the Tanakh, they think of the law of Moses, the Ten Commandments, the creation account, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on, Joseph. But if 28% of the Hebrew scripture is prophetic, that's incredibly significant. Hey friends, we are here once again with Seth Postell, and today he'll be talking to us about Messianic prophecy. What is Messianic prophecy, and how much of the Bible is actually prophetic? Let's get into Messianic prophecy. First of all, what is a Messianic prophecy for those that don't know?
Yeah, so, we can go more generally and say that the Old Testament, nobody would deny this, the Hebrew Bible promises better days. The Hebrew Bible is very aware of the world. The world that we live in is not the world that, it's not an ideal world, right? And that there's pain, there's suffering, there's sorrow. When it comes specifically to the Jewish people, a lot of the biblical history comes within the context of failure to attain God's standards, God's promises to bless Israel and the nations. And so you have within the Hebrew Bible constantly this tension between the now, which is we consistently and continually disobey God, and that comes against or it comes in conflict with promises of a better day. And so you have a lot of passages that we would call, I guess in technical terms, eschatology, or passages about the last days, right? But the last days is kind of a broad concept that deals with some kind of a redemption and some kind of a redeemer. And so when we talk about a messianic prophecy, we're typically specifically talking about those passages that were written to foretell the work, the coming, the reign, or even the suffering of Israel's future redeemer, a future leader, a future ruler, a future priest, if you were, that would ultimately bring about Israel's redemption and be the key to bringing blessing to all nations.
Okay, so when we come to what's considered a messianic prophecy, that's what you need to consider. How it relates to the one that is coming to be the redeemer of not just the Jewish people, but all people.
Correct. And let me simply say this, that one of the things that separated the God of Israel from the other gods was that there weren't just predictions. Within paganism, there were all sorts of predictions, right? And that was part of, they would read the entrails, they would spill the entrails of animals and read the signs and the times. But the God of Israel is the God who could accurately tell us what would be. And that's obviously, you see this in Deuteronomy, the test of a true prophet is right. A prophet that speaks faithfully with respect to the scriptures and accurately with respect to the future. And so the whole notion that there would be messianic prophecy would be totally expected within the context of the God of Israel. And in fact, how would you know that the God of Israel is truly the God of Israel? Is because he could predict things before they took place. And that's actually a polemic in the book of Isaiah. That's what distinguishes. God said, I already told you these things would happen exactly like this before they happen.
Right. Well, when I learned that 28%, I guess roughly speaking, of the Old Testament is prophetic, I was really surprised. When most people think of the Hebrew scriptures or the Tanakh, they think of the law of Moses, the Ten Commandments, the creation account, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on, Joseph. But if 28% of the Hebrew scripture is prophetic, that's incredibly significant.
Well, it's interesting. You could actually play with these percentages a little bit, because how do you judge how much percent of a book is about eschatology or about prophecy in the future? Let me give you an example of what I mean. So how much of the book of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, is about Aslan? Right?
Not much.
Well, yes and no. In other words, why was the book written? The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was written in order to point us to Aslan. But most of the book, Aslan, doesn't even appear in the book. It's like,
Yeah.
but every aspect of that book in some form or fashion is preparing the way for the lion. And I say this because, if we're going to count heads, if we're going to count heads and say, okay, this verse is about the Messiah, but the context is, that the next chapter is not, that can be a little bit misleading, because I would argue that, even the Torah, the way that it's structured as a story, the whole of the story leads us to the last days. It leads us to God's promise to give us a circumcised heart and the coming of the King. And so, how much percent of the Torah is messianic? Well, you could count the verses and say less than 1%, or you can look at how the story is structured and you can say 100%.
Stay tuned for our next video with Seth Postell, where we'll be discussing the forbidden chapter in the Hebrew Scriptures and the leading rabbinic interpretation of this chapter. You won't want to miss this one. Jews for Jesus is a nonprofit organization that exists to support you as you explore Jewish life with faith in Jesus. We facilitate Jewish community all around the world as we provide spiritual care and local services. We also raise awareness about the fact that for thousands of years, there have been Jewish people like us who have embraced Jesus as the Jewish Messiah. And even though he was possibly the most famous Jewish person in all of history, there are still many Jewish people who have never had the chance to be exposed to the teachings of Jesus. That's something we seek to change. For more information, to chat with us live, and to sign up for our newsletter, check us out at jewsforjesus.org or on social media at Facebook and Instagram.